I was driving over 140 kilometers per hour, yet she kept running beside my car. It wasn't a reflection or a mistake. This time I saw her so close that I could even see how she smiled. Good evening. Welcome to this special episode of Night Tales, one where the dose of terror will be doubled. Today, there's no escape from the paranormal world that surrounds us that's very, very close, much closer than you think. And that's something we always need to keep in mind. Even if you're one of those people who listens to this podcast to feel accompanied, to have some background noise, to fall asleep, or just for entertainment, you skeptics are also very close to becoming the next protagonists of night stories. So let's focus on an hour of stories. I hope my voice holds out until the end. As you can hear, my throat is worse than last week, and I still can't leave the house, but I can work always, even if it hurts. It's time to dive into the next night stories. Hello, Uriel. My name is Ari. I'm 50 years old, and I just discovered your podcast a few months ago. Honestly, anything involving ghosts really scares me, but I heard you by chance on a flight, and since then I haven't stopped listening. You keep me company in the car while I cook, and when I'm home alone, though sometimes you really scare me. I don't remember ever seeing a ghost, but I do have a very strong memory from when I was a child. From a time when I lived at my dad's house with my half-siblings. When my mom got married again, they were older than me. And at night, I would hear them scream, really scream with a lot of fear, like they woke up full of terror. I'm not lying to you. Once I saw one of them pee himself just like that, in the hallway from the fright he woke up with. I didn't understand anything, but then I heard them telling my mom that they had seen Bloody Maria. That's what they called her. They said she was a very ugly woman, very skinny and covered in blood, who would appear standing at the foot of their beds. I never saw her, so for years I thought they were just children's stories. But I remember perfectly the fear they lived with, and that no one in that house slept peacefully. A few years later, my mom divorced again and we moved. I lost contact with them. Sometimes I wonder if they also managed to leave behind what they used to see. Now that I'm an adult, I have a serious sleep problem. Since I was very young, I've needed pills to sleep, but now it's worse. I don't like talking about it, but without them, I struggle a lot. I can't get any rest. I wake up more tired than when I went to sleep, and I have really strange, intense nightmares that leave me exhausted all the next day. What I'm about to tell you happened in January of this year. I forgot to take the pill, and it was a terrible night. I kept waking up all the time. Everything hurt, and to top it off, I had a dream that still goes around in my head to this day. I dreamed I walked down my street near my house, but no matter how far I went, I couldn't find it. I kept going around and around. It was very windy, very cold. Everything was dark, and there were no cars passing by. There was no one around. All I wanted was to get home. I felt that if I didn't, something would happen to me. After a long search, I finally found it. I went in, passed by my kids' room, and saw that they were awake, but they didn't say anything to me. They just looked at me like they were scared. I remember that a lot, their faces. I didn't say anything to them either. I just kept going to my room, lay down, and that's where the dream ended. In the morning, I didn't see them. They leave for school very early, but later at lunch, as always during our time together, one of my sons, Marco, asked me if I had gone into his room in the middle of the night. I laughed and told them no, that it must have been a dream of theirs, but both of them stayed quiet. It hadn't been a dream, and it wasn't just one of them who had seen me. Then Manuel, the youngest, said, "We saw something else. It looked like you, but it wasn't you." They told me it looked like an older woman, like a version of me, but older. Very pale and completely covered in blood, as if she had bathed in blood. Manuel said she didn't walk up. She just appeared in front of them, stared, and said nothing. And then she went straight to my room. Manuel said that from his bed he could see her better than Marco could, that she didn't have feet, that she was floating. Uriel. I swear I felt like I was going to faint from the shock. I felt like what they saw really was me, that it was that version of myself from the dream, because everything fits, the timing, the path, even going into her room and seeing them. It was as if my sleeping body had projected itself and they had seen that. And suddenly I remembered that woman from my childhood home, Bloody Maria, and I felt a fear I can't even explain. Because what if what they saw, what terrified my half-siblings, was me wandering around the house in my dreams? But there's something I don't understand. Why do they see me as so old? Because they saw me covered in blood as if it were me, but in another time. Or an echo of a past life, or maybe as if I were my own ghost, but of something that hasn't happened yet. Maybe, and this is something I haven't been able to stop thinking about, maybe it's the ghost of the day I die. I don't know if anyone in the community can tell me anything. All I know is that I try not to dream. Since then, I haven't forgotten to take my sleeping pill again. And when I listen to your stories, I always do it with a light on. Thank you for reading my message, Uriel, and to the whole community, thank you for being with us with your stories. Even though sometimes they keep me up at night, in my case, it could be better. I've wanted to share this story for a while, but only now can I. A few years ago in Ajusco, something happened to me while I was with my then girlfriend. Interestingly, the girlfriend I had afterwards didn't like me telling this story. And actually, she asked me not to share it with the show, but now that I'm single again, I can finally share it. It was a quick trip, just for the weekend. We weren't going camping or anything. We just wanted to get out of the city for a bit, breathe some fresh air, take some pictures, walk a little, and eat over there. That day, like always when you get too comfortable, we ended up leaving late to go back. We didn't keep track of the time, and it was almost night when we started going down the road. As usual, she fell asleep in her seat as soon as we started driving. I drove carefully because there was a lot of fog. I already knew the road, but that time the fog was really thick, dense. At times I couldn't see well even with the high beams on. I was driving slowly, under 40 kilometers per hour. When I saw someone suddenly cross the road a few meters in front of us, I braked a little out of reflex, but that person had already passed. It's just that when they crossed, I didn't see their features. It was a tall, dark figure, like with very long arms. I don't know how to explain it, because you could tell it was a human shape, but it seemed out of normal proportions. I didn't see any clothes, but there weren't any details either, so I don't know. The only thing I can say is that it was just a silhouette. A few seconds went by. My heart was racing, but I tried to calm myself down. I thought it could be the reflection of a tree or someone walking around, even though it didn't make sense. And then another one crossed. This one was shorter. It looked like a child, but the shape was the same. Disproportionate. All black, no face, no features, nothing. Just a black silhouette walking like a shadow, very slowly crossing the road. And that's when I stopped. My girlfriend woke up, asked me what was going on, and I told her to wait, that there were people crossing, and I didn't want to keep going so I wouldn't cause an accident. But we didn't see anyone else anymore. After a few moments, she started to get nervous. She told me to move forward, even if it was slowly. And when I did, it started to smell weird. A very strong smell, like wet earth, but mixed with something else, like metal, a strong metallic smell that you could feel in your throat. If you've ever gotten hit and had blood in your mouth, you'll understand the kind of metallic sensation I'm talking about. My girlfriend noticed it too. She rolled down the window, but it didn't go away. On the contrary, the smell was out there. She asked me if I had run over something, but no, we didn't hear any bump. We didn't see any animals, nothing. I moved ahead cautiously without stopping until we left the fog. I still don't know what that was. I've gone back to Ajusco many times, even through the same entrance, and nothing like that ever happened to me again. But that time, those figures crossing the road through the fog, one after another, without looking, without running, as if they didn't care that we were coming. It's an image that will stay with me forever. Thank you for reading me, and greetings to the whole community. I'd never seen a ghost or experienced anything strange. I'm not fearful or very religious, but I did have one experience. I rarely mention it, but remembering always makes my stomach turn. I'm not sure if it was my imagination, something spiritual, or something else I can't explain, but it happened to me. And it happened at my grandmother's house. She died a few years ago. She lived most of her life in a small house in San Nicolas. Although the house is still owned by the family, it is usually empty. My aunt cares for it, watering the plants and so on, but few people stay there. I stayed there for a few weeks while searching for an apartment. The house was empty, just with some old furniture and things they left as they were. And the room where I stayed was my grandmother's. Everything was untouched. The wooden bed, the little table with her Bible, the saints, even her opened creams, her expired medicines, and her mirror. A mirror that was on her dresser. It was one of those old ones with a rusty metal frame. The reflection was no longer clear. It always looked dirty, kind of foggy, even if you cleaned it. I remember trying many times to clean it with rags, glass cleaner, and napkins, but it never looked right. It was always dull. But I left it like that. After all, it was just there out of habit, because no one had moved anything of Grandma's. I didn't put on makeup or do my hair in front of it, but a few nights after I arrived, I woke up to go to the bathroom. And as I walked past the communal mirror, I saw something that wasn't in the room. In the reflection right behind me, I could see the silhouette of a person standing next to the bed. I turned quickly, but nothing was there. It had only appeared in the reflection. When I looked back, the silhouette was already gone. I just stood there like an idiot for a while. I wasn't scared, but I did feel a really strange discomfort. I thought I was seeing things, that it was just my shadow, and I went back to bed. But then it started happening more and more often, usually in the early morning. I would walk past the mirror and get the impression that something was moving in it, as if someone was there, but blurry and barely in the back of the room. One night, unintentionally, just out of habit, I was combing my hair there in front of it, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw it clearly. There was a woman standing behind me, about 2 steps away. She was thin. She was dressed in white with gray hair tied up in a bun. I wasn't scared at first. I just froze because I didn't see her directly, only in the mirror. And that somehow made me think I was safe, that she wasn't really there. I stared at her for a few seconds, and that's when I realized it really was her, my grandmother. But something wasn't right. She was smiling at me, but she wasn't smiling like she used to. She didn't have that calm face she always had. Her mouth was half open, but she didn't say anything. And her teeth? I don't know how to explain it. I get chills just remembering. Her teeth looked full of dirt, like she had eaten mud, like her mouth was full of something rotten. That's when I started crying. I covered my face and ran to the bathroom, and I didn't come out until morning. In the morning, I went to a friend's house, and even though I only went back for my things, accompanied by her and another friend, I never stayed in that house again. No one believed me. Even now, no one believes me, not even my friends. They say it was stress and that sleeping in my grandmother's room influenced me. And maybe that's true. But since then, whenever I see an old mirror, one of those with a metal frame, even if it's clean, I'm still afraid to turn around. Community, thank you for continuing to listen to this special double-length episode, which is a thank you to everyone who voted for us at the Spotify Awards, and also for everyone who supports this project by subscribing, rating the episodes with their comments, and sharing their favorite stories with their friends. You took it from being a community of 5,000 people, sharing stories in a Facebook group, to what is now the most listened to Spanish language podcast in the world for 2 years in a row. Do you realize how far our stories go? How someone can tell a small anecdote, a brief sighting in a little town nestled in the Mexican mountains, and reach the whole world. About the places we've gotten to know and that many people get to know through your stories. With this project, we've gone from Baja California all the way to Alaska with that story about the fishing boat, from a train between Montreal and Ottawa in Canada, where a creature that looked like some kind of Bigfoot was seen, all the way to the Minotaur of Patagonia. We've visited together a strange statue that moves on a bridge in Prague. We've experienced urban legends, from a highway in Uruguay, a haunted park in Kyoto, and a cabin in the woods guarding a door to hell somewhere between Jalisco and Michoacan. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, we'll be with you through everything that comes. When you're part of the community, you won't face any new challenge in life alone. We'll be here. We continue with more stories because there's still a lot of special things tonight. I'm not sure how old I was, just that I was very young and in elementary school, but I don't remember if I was in 1st or 2nd grade. I never forgot that night. For several reasons. This happened in Ciudad Juarez, in a neighborhood that was new at the time. I don't think it even had a name yet. One that's built closer to the desert than the city. They seem to be put together in pieces, with a street here and a house over there. Small houses scattered around. Some are well built, and others, because of their size, look more like guard booths than homes. Up close, you see they're made of cardboard with sheet metal roofs. You know, which neighborhoods? I mean, I'm sure in your city, even if it's not the same, there's one just like it. That night there was an emergency in the family. I don't really remember what it was. Maybe I never really knew. My mom called a cab to take my little brother and me to her godmother's house. If I was about 6, he was probably 4. We didn't really know that lady. I didn't remember her. My mom said she owed her many favors because she helped a lot during her pregnancy with me. But I didn't remember her from before, and I didn't like her. She was nice, but I didn't like the way she looked at you. My brother, on the other hand, felt very comfortable from the moment we arrived. He even called her grandma by accident at some point. The house was made of wood, one of those quick constructions, just to get by. It was alone, truly alone. There was nothing around it, just empty land, just darkness. It felt like we were far from everything. My mom left very quickly. I don't even remember if she said goodnight to us. She just told us to behave, that she would come for us the next day. She got back into the taxi that dropped us off. The lady gave us some blankets and we lay down on the floor in a room that seemed improvised. She told us to huddle to endure the cold, warning it would be a tough night. The house wasn't comfortable. It smelled strange, like damp and old rags and dusty. But what I remember most was the silence, a silence that scared me. Not hearing cars or people all the time like at my house. At some point in the early morning, I woke up. I felt cold, very cold. The lady was putting on a jacket by the door. She saw I was awake and said to me, "Don't get up, mija. My son will be here soon. I always go wait for him on the road, a kilometer from here. There are a lot of bad people around these parts. I don't like him coming up here alone." I didn't know what to say. I pretended to fall asleep again. I heard her close the door and tell me she wouldn't be long, and then nothing. I tried to sleep, but something made me uneasy. Maybe it was the cold or being in a house that wasn't mine. I remember I was hugging my brother, who had fallen asleep, and at some point I heard someone knocking on the door. They were very soft knocks, like someone who didn't want to wake everyone up but did want to announce themselves. I thought maybe the lady had left without taking the key, that maybe she was already back and needed to come in. I got up feeling kind of disoriented as you feel when you sleep in a house that's not your own. When I got to the door, I realized it was too early for her to be back, that I shouldn't just open it like that. But even so, I was about to do it. I had my hand on the lock when something stopped me. I don't know what it was. Hunch, maybe you could say. A strange feeling, like someone was telling me to wait. The door was made of very thin, poorly made wood, and since it was uneven, there was a pretty big gap between the floor and the bottom part. In that gap, the lady had put some rags, probably so the desert air wouldn't come in. Very carefully, without making any noise, I removed one of the rags and peeked through the gap under the door. And that's when I saw them. Some bare feet, dirty, as if covered in dirt, but also with something else, with lots of dark stains. They looked like a woman's feet, but they weren't still. They moved, they shifted their weight onto the soles. They lifted a little, as if the person was anxious or nervous, waiting for me to open the door. I don't know what disgusted me more. Whether it was the dirty feet, the long toenails, or the fact that I didn't know who was out there. The only thing I know is that I carefully put the rag back, and then I secured the door with a chair, just like I'd seen in the movies. The house was so fragile anyone could have pushed open the door, but that chair gave me some peace of mind. I laid down again, but I couldn't sleep anymore. About 20 minutes later, I heard the key going in. The lock turned slowly and the door opened. I got up immediately, trembling, with the chair still blocking the door, and I pushed it aside to clear the way. The lady with a young man, likely her son, barely greeted me. I told her what I had seen. I said that someone had knocked and that I saw those horrible bare feet there, standing in front of the door. I locked it out of fear. She looked at me like she found it endearing. She gave a slight closed-mouth smile, as if avoiding laughing at me. She said to me, "No neighbors come into the houses here, Mita. No one is nearby, and there are no ghosts either. No one has ever tried to scare us." The son looked at me seriously. He didn't even bother to say he believed me or that he would check. He just said lazily, "It was just a dream, girl. At this hour, everything is scary." But I know it wasn't a dream. I hadn't fallen asleep. I didn't imagine it. I saw those feet. I saw how they moved, how they waited for someone to open the door. Something was out there. Something that was neither the lady nor her son. Although no one ever believed me, that image stayed with me forever. Thank you for reading my story. Hi, my name is Luis Eduardo Alameda. I'm Mexican, but I've been living in the United States since my teenage years. A few years ago, I moved to Philadelphia for work, and this happened. I didn't move. I was just going with my girlfriend, Florencia, who is Argentinian and who introduced me to the channel. We had just arrived in a city neither of us knew, but where I was offered a great job, so we decided to go for it. We didn't know anyone there, so we rented an old house we found online in an area that seemed quiet. A neighbor told us that the house was from the late 1800s, one of those old two-story houses attached to each other like in a row, and from the outside they look beautiful, with brick facades and trees on the sidewalk. Those houses we Latinos say look like they're from a movie. Inside, though, it was neglected. Nothing serious either, just little details. Creaking wood or old doors, things like that. Still, we loved it because it had a lot of natural light, and above all, because we really needed a place to live. The first week, nothing strange happened. It was just hard for us to sleep because everything creaked. You could hear the neighbors' footsteps, the distant trains. But that was normal, right? That's what we thought. One night at about 2 a.m., footsteps downstairs woke me. At first I thought it was my girlfriend, but then I saw her sleeping next to me. I went downstairs to check, but found nothing. The door was locked. I went back upstairs and eventually fell asleep, though it was hard. The same thing happened the next night. This time, my girlfriend heard it as well. She asked me not to go downstairs, that it could be dangerous. But we didn't hear any voices or see any signs that someone had come in. It was just very slow footsteps, as if someone was calmly walking through the living room. On the third day, it wasn't just that anymore. It sounded like someone was going up the stairs. I got up suddenly, left the room, and there was no one there. But when I returned, my girlfriend was on the bed, trembling like I'd never seen before. She told me that when I left, she saw a tall shadow, like a person with a very old hat, one of those tall ones like pilgrims wear, peeking through the bedroom door with one hand inside. She said she turned to look at the figure as soon as she sensed it, but it didn't move. It was just there, completely still, peeking in. Since that night, we haven't slept peacefully. We heard the same footsteps every night. Sometimes they were closer. Sometimes it sounded like they stopped at the bedroom door, and other times they were farther away. One time we found one of the kitchen windows open in the morning, even though we were sure we had closed it. We searched for explanations, checked everything, and spoke to the owner, who said the house was old, but no one else had complained. She also provided the previous tenant's contact info, and even though we felt bad, our curiosity and desperation were so great that we did call them, but they never answered. What scared us the most happened one early morning when we both woke up at the same time with a horrible feeling. We both felt, or rather we knew, someone else was in the room with us. We didn't hear anything, we didn't see anything, but both of us opened our eyes at the same time, unable to move, and we stayed like that for several minutes. At least, that's how it was for me. Minutes, long minutes. My girlfriend cried all night. I don't know how bad that scare was, but she got even more frightened than when she saw the shadow with the hat peeking through the door. As you can understand, that very night we decided we had to leave. We soon found an apartment that was much smaller, more expensive, but new, and we moved in as soon as we could. Since then, nothing ever happened to us again, neither there nor anywhere else until now. But I feel that whatever was with us in that apartment, thank God, stayed there. Sometimes I think it was the stress, the move to a city in a part of the country we didn't know, far from all our friends, all our new experiences. But then I remember how real everything felt. The footsteps, what we saw, that certainty that on the worst nights there was someone in the room with us. And now I don't know what to think. But I'm grateful for the time to read my story. I was 4 years old. I barely remember some things, but there are memories that stay clearly marked in your mind, you know? As if they were imprinted on your retinas, not just recorded in your brain, like a scar we see again every time we close our eyes. This is one of those, and I've always believed that was the first ghost I ever saw. But you'll see, because it's strange, very strange to say that. My parents left me for a weekend with the family in Tampico at my grandparents' big house. I loved going there. I always liked it. The place smelled of wet earth, as my grandmother watered her trees and plants daily. Inside, it always smelled like burnt coffee. It had old curtains that barely let the light in, and a dumb old dog that didn't even bark anymore, but still always lay next to the entrance, as if he were protecting the memory of all that had happened there. But that time when they left me all alone was different. My grandparents weren't there, only 2 of my aunts, some older cousins, and it was like everyone was coming and going. Nobody was paying much attention to me. They sometimes told me to watch television or gave me candy, but it felt like no one was really staying in the house. It felt like everyone was just passing through, as if they didn't really want to be there. I wanted to play with my cousins as usual, but they acted strange and wouldn't talk. One of them kept crying, another one ignored me as if I was a bother. And my parents, well, they told me they'd come back for me as soon as they could, that I should behave, not cause any trouble, eat whatever they gave me, and then they left. That night, I don't even remember how I fell asleep, just that everything was very quiet. You couldn't hear a car passing by or the distant sea, unlike before. Nothing. And that a soft sound woke me up. Someone crying. I sat on the bed, my heart pounding. It was a restrained cry, quiet, but very sad, and it was coming from my grandparents' room. I got out of bed and walked silently down the hallway, which creaked with every step. The floor was cold. I don't remember if it was cold that night, but I was very cold. When I got to the door, it wasn't closed, just ajar. I pushed it a little. And there was the person who was crying. It was my tata, my grandfather. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his back to me, without a shirt, just in his pajama pants like he always was when he was at home. He hunched and cried. He was crying in a way I can't forget, like it hurt him deep in his soul. I stared at him for a moment, feeling a strange, unfamiliar sadness. I'd never seen my grandpa cry before. I didn't know how to take it. I stepped toward him and spoke. "Grandpa, are you okay? Does anything hurt?" He stayed still for a few seconds and answered me without turning to look at me. "I'm tired, son. Everything hurts now. I just want to sleep now." I didn't really understand, but I knew something was wrong. He had been sick for a while, and I knew that's why we were visiting him more, but I had never seen him in so much pain. I ran to the room where one of my cousins was and told him that Grandpa was crying, that he needed help. And he got angry. He told me not to say nonsense, to be quiet, but I kept insisting. I swore to him that he was crying, that he was there. So, reluctantly, he listened to me. We got up and walked down the hallway together, and just before we got there, he heard it too. Soft crying, but it was there. Inside, she kept crying. My cousin stopped, grabbed my arm, and ran with me to the living room. He called my aunt and uncle, crying and shouting, saying he heard his grandpa crying. And that's when everything started. I was completely lost. People were just screaming, crying, running, and calling. An aunt took me to sleep with her, and she cried until I fell asleep. I think she cried all night. In the morning, when they were serving breakfast, the phone rang. An uncle from the hospital where my parents were, where everyone was, told us that Grandpa had just passed away right at dawn, that they had finally let him rest. They told me everything, but I didn't process it. I remember that I didn't cry during those days. I didn't feel like my grandpa was dead. I felt like he was on a trip, that at some point he was going to come back. But years later, going over that story, I understood it. I understood that when we arrived, when they left me at that house with my uncles, Grandpa had already been very sick for days, hospitalized. I realized his body had stopped responding and he was surviving, only thanks to the machines. My grandmother asked her children to let him rest because he had suffered enough, but they refused. They said he had to hold on, that maybe he could endure more, that he was going to recover. Until what happened that night, when they told what we heard, when we said what we saw, that he was crying in his bed at home, that everything hurt. When we told that, something changed. I don't know if it was fear, if it was guilt, but that's when they finally agreed to let him go. They disconnected him, and he still lived a few more hours, long enough for his children to come in and say goodbye, hoping that somewhere in his consciousness he was still listening. And me? I grew up thinking I saw a ghost, but not like in the movies. Not one of those that scare you, that seek revenge. I saw my Tata and he was still alive, but he didn't want to go on like that anymore. And I understand him, even though when I close my eyes and remember that image of him crying there with his bare torso, his white hair on his back hunched over, asking me to let him rest, I'm still really scared. Maybe because that's when I understood, even if I couldn't say it, that there really are moments when the soul is very tired and just can't go on anymore. Thank you for still being here, community, but you haven't survived this episode yet. This is the last break you have, and I want to take this opportunity to remind you that you can find my book, either the first edition or the special hardcover edition, at some of your favorite bookstores. It's not available everywhere anymore. It's starting to sell out, but you can still find it online at the link I always leave for you in the description. It's a book written with a lot of love, and I'm sure you'll read it in 2 or 3 sittings, and I hope it leaves you wanting to keep reading more, especially if it's horror. For now, it's time to continue because we still have a couple of stories left tonight. I don't know if this counts as something paranormal, maybe not. I'm not trying to convince anyone, I just want to share it because it keeps bothering me. For a while, I worked as a rideshare driver. It wasn't something I had planned. I'm an engineer and until recently lived with my wife and son in a city in the state of Mexico. I had a good job, but began seeking a way out because insecurity had caught up with us. Once someone tried to follow my wife while she was coming home alone. Another time, they tried to take our son outside a store, and the last time was even worse. A homeless man tried to push my son onto the avenue with cars passing by. So, in the middle of a busy street full of people, my wife stepped in and he started hitting her right there in the street while people watched and nobody did anything. I was working in Veracruz at that time in an area with no signal. I found out about everything that night when I got back to the hotel. That same night, I made the decision. I told him, if I'm going to keep traveling so much, at least I want you all to be safe. So I started looking abroad, something that would allow me to start moving them out of there, and I got lucky. A United States company showed interest in my profile and offered me a contract. I quit right away so I could be available for interviews, paperwork, exams, and more. But the process was much slower than I thought. The appointment for the work visa took 3 months. Then came the legal part, dealing with lawyers, more paperwork. In total, I waited almost 5 months, and since I couldn't be without income, I started driving for an app. I had a car, and it was just for a while. I've never liked being without work. At first, it was very difficult. During the day, the traffic made me use more gas, and the air conditioning drained me. I realized that on many shifts, I was barely making enough for the gas tank, so I started working at night. Without heat, without traffic, the rides were faster, and yes, it was calmer, or so I thought. Because from that point on, what happened to me is what brings me here, to write to you. One night, coming back from a long trip already close to my house, I thought I saw a white light in the rearview mirror, like something moving, about the size of a child, running alongside the car. It was by the back window on the passenger side. I turned around, but there was nothing there. What I saw in the mirror had disappeared. I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just tiredness, a reflection. I went home, and a few kilometers ahead, 4 guys in a taxi tried to rob me. I escaped because, luckily, it happened on streets I knew well, and they didn't. But I was left with a strange feeling that I had barely escaped. Days passed, and I saw the light in the mirror again. I was well rested, well fed, well slept. It wasn't fatigue. But now it wasn't just a light. It had a shape, an illuminated figure, as if it were being hit directly by a car's high beams. It moved alongside the car as if it were running, but sometimes it didn't look human. It looked more like an animal, like a very tall dog with a long snout. It moved oddly, seeming to float and jump simultaneously, always exactly level with my right rear window, as if it were running while holding on to it. I always saw it in the rearview mirror. Every time I tried to look at it directly, it disappeared. It stayed with me like that all night. A few hours later, a driver ran a red light and almost crashed into me. I braked in time but lost some control and blew out a tire on the curb. But the car next to me wasn't so lucky and crashed straight into that reckless driver. That's when I started to get suspicious. Not that it was a ghost or anything like that, but I felt like whatever was watching me was trying to warn me about something, as if its presence was a sign that there was danger nearby. The weeks kept passing like that. Some nights it would run beside me. I saw it through the mirror. Other times, it simply wouldn't appear, but every time I saw it, something happened. On one occasion, for example, it was a motorcyclist who started following me. I noticed because I made illogical moves, took unnecessary turns, and he kept following behind. When I stopped at a traffic light, he pulled up next to me. He kept looking inside at the same rear window where I always saw that thing. That's when I gathered my courage, rolled down the passenger window, leaned over, and confronted him. I showed him a small knife I had with me, one my dad had lent me. I don't know if it was that or the people passing by, but the motorcyclist immediately left. That night, I finally decided to stop driving. I was getting too many signs, and I kept taking risks, acting like I was invincible. Luckily, a week later, the visa finally arrived, and we traveled. For a while, I thought everything was over. We arrived in a quiet city with expensive houses, but safety was all I cared about. I started my new job, and a few months later, they sent me to Europe for training. I was already completely far from that world, from the state of Mexico where I had seen that thing following me. Very far from home, but somehow I hadn't left it behind. One night, driving back to my hotel after spending the weekend in Bratislava, I saw it again, right on the highway in Austria. That figure running alongside the car. But this time it wasn't blurry. It didn't look child-sized. It didn't look like an animal. This time I could see it clearly. It was a woman. A white figure with that light that seemed to reflect as if made of gas floated next to the car, almost touching the glass. This time it stayed longer, more visible than ever. I could even see its black eyes fixed on me as it almost touched the window. I didn't look at her directly, but I kept glancing at her in the mirror and she wouldn't leave. I sped up. The highway was empty. I reached 200 kilometers per hour and she was still there. Until at one point she moved forward. This time, she wasn't at the window behind my seat anymore. This time, she was at the passenger window. This time, as a whole. I could see her there, out of the corner of my eye, not just through the rear view mirror anymore. She was there with me, really there. She touched the window and I couldn't turn around. But out of the corner of my eye, it was very clear that she was smiling at me. I don't know if it was in a friendly way or if she was mocking me, but it terrified me either way. As soon as I stopped seeing her, I hit the brakes, pulled over, and started to cry. My hands were shaking with fear, and I couldn't keep driving like that. It wasn't just the fright, but also the feeling that I hadn't escaped from anything. That whatever it was, it had followed me to the other side of the world. And at the same time, that insecurity I always feared for my family was there again. I realized that nowhere was I ever going to be completely safe, that they would be okay, that they were always safe. Everything seemed frightening everywhere, and we can't control it. That was the last time until now that I saw her running next to my car. She only appears in my dreams now, but she doesn't run next to me anymore. I always see her behind my son. I'm an elementary school teacher with many years of experience in public schools across the North. I've worked with many different children from various families, and you learn a lot over time. You know when a child is exaggerating, when they're making something up to get attention, and when they're telling you about something that really scared them. And that's what happened to me with this story. With a 4th grade student, a quiet, polite boy who rarely causes trouble or interrupts. He told me during recess when few kids were on the playground. And he did it with that tone a child uses when asking for help without knowing how to do it. I don't know if it was a ghost or not or what explanation there might be, but I do know he didn't make it up. Because he's not the kind of child who seeks that kind of attention. And because while he was telling me, his eyes filled with tears, and not from sadness, from fear. He told me that this experience didn't happen at his house, but at his uncle and aunt's house, where he sometimes stayed over on Fridays. The house is in a neighborhood that appears to be on the city's outskirts due to its abandoned look. It's actually one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. It started to get populated many years ago without permits or services, and little by little it became regularized. The houses that used to be made of wood became cement houses. Some streets were paved, the deeds started to arrive, but other things didn't change, like that street where his uncle's house is. It's still a dirt road, a strip about 4 or 5 meters wide that separates the houses from the cemetery. Just like that. In the cemetery, there's no wall, no fence, nothing. You just cross the street and there are the graves. The boy told me he always thought it was strange, that he liked to watch from the window, because sometimes people dressed in black would come walking from far away to visit their dead. That for some reason, it didn't scare him. It seemed sad to him, but it didn't frighten him. He told me it happened the last time he stayed over playing video games with his cousin, since he can't have a console at home. He told me they started playing in the afternoon and didn't stop. And since they didn't make any noise, his uncles didn't get upset and let them be. Around 11, his cousin fell asleep. Excited by the rare freedom, he stayed up playing alone. He had to make the most of it. It was raining outside, not a storm, just a light rain. The kind that sounds nice on the roof and makes people stay in earlier. There was no one on the street. That's when he heard a very faint moan, like a muffled wail. He went to the window, he told me, pulled the curtain aside a little and saw him. A figure among the trees, among the graves, a man in a suit but covered in dirt, as if he had just come out of one of them. He wasn't walking straight, he was limping, and his face wasn't normal. He said it looked like a poorly made, melted mask, with the mouth misplaced, eyes too far apart, and head tilted. Professor, he looked kind of like a zombie. From those movies I'm not allowed to watch, he told me. And, of course, you might think that was it. A mind fueled by everything he's seen online. But the next thing he said made me drop that idea. He told me he pinched himself, that he hit his legs to see if it was a dream, and it wasn't. That the man walked to the street, that he crossed the rain-soaked ground without stopping. And then he stood still right in front of his uncle's house, looking toward the door. The dogs barked, first one, then everyone on the street. And that was what made his uncles get up. He ran out of the room to tell them. His aunt was the first to look in, and she turned pale. When she did, she screamed for her husband, who came out with a lamp and turned on the patio lights. She said aloud that someone was snooping around the houses. A couple of neighbors peeked out and came outside too. Those houses don't have fences, the yards are connected. Anyone can cross from one to another if they want to. They searched among several men, but they didn't find anyone. Strangely, the dogs all went quiet at once. And a moment later, the dogs from the street behind started barking. Then, the ones farther away, as if something was moving away, walking through those abandoned muddy streets. The boy told me that he went back inside, scared to death, and that he heard his aunt telling his cousin to make sure the window was closed tight, and that someone was peeking inside. He asked him, "And your uncle?" When he went back inside, he said something that still gives me chills. He said that around the house, through the windows, there were some big, deep, clearly marked footprints in the mud, footprints that someone had just made. Footprints that came from the cemetery, but they couldn't find where they led. The boy spoke to me in a low voice, as if afraid to repeat it. And even though he asked me not to tell his parents, at least for now, I had to tell it. Because I know he didn't make it up. That night, he saw something that changed him. Something that made me, after so many years of teaching, go blank, not knowing what to say to calm him down.